While every instrument is important and has its place in a mix, bass is unique in that it both carries the weight of a track, giving it power, and glues the rest of the arrangement together. Given that, let's look at why bass matters more than you might think, especially if you're a guitarist. Firstly, let's cover placement. This ties directly into the idea of the weight a bass part brings to your arrangement. Not just what to play, but when and when not to play. Because a bass line can serve multiple roles at once, deciding when and where to use it, whether that's a simple root note bass line, chords, or something more intricate, is crucial. Take for instance a verse to chorus or pre-chorus to chorus structure. If you want your chorus to hit hard and feel dense, it helps to consider how the bass contributes to that contrast. One approach is to strip the bass away during the verse, or at least a bar or two before the chorus is introduced, so that when transitioning into the next section, the impact of the low end feels massive by comparison. There's a number of ways you can go about doing this, like entirely omitting the bass for a more scaled back section and then reintroducing it during the chorus, as I've done here. Find that too drastic for your song at hand, but still want to give a brief moment of contrast, then cutting a bar or two out of the bass before your chorus hits can be another great way to use this idea. In this example, I have a bass line for the first section, but right before I transition into the chorus, I've left this spot empty, so you feel a momentary dropout in the low end before things come back even bigger during the chorus. The next technique is playing style. This really works hand in hand with what we've just covered. Not only does the placement of the bass affect how much punch is given to certain sections of your song, but how you play the part has an equal effect on how impactful it feels. A tightly locked in, palm muted or staccato bass line can create a sense of restraint and control, which makes any shift into a more open, aggressive playing style feel even more explosive. Similarly, the difference between fingerstyle and pick playing can dramatically alter the energy of a section. So think about whether your part should feel warm and rounded or sharp and driving. These stylistic choices work in tandem with your arrangement to shape how your dynamics are perceived. Not only does the physical playing style affect your sound, but equally the articulation of your bass part does as well. Say the difference between legato and staccato. Depending on the sound you want to evoke, considering the feel and phrasing of a bass line is incredibly important. It's not about one being better than the other, they're just different flavors. Sometimes I'll go for a more melodic, busier bass line, and other times I'll keep things simple and just focus on reinforcing the root notes or low end. In this case, I went with the simpler approach, but I still wanted to make the rhythm feel interesting, so instead of sticking to straight quarter or eighth notes, I built a part around the kick accents while avoiding the snare, which gives the groove a nice bounce. First, I'll play it straight through with no gaps, and then I'll add the spaces, so you can hear the contrast. As to which works best will be entirely dependent on the sound you're after. Sound design and the tone of a bass is the final aspect I want to cover here. Along with how you play a bass, where you place it, and how you phrase your lines, the actual sound of one, whether that's an electric, synth, acoustic, or otherwise, also has a big impact on the weight and dynamics of your song. Choosing the right bass sound helps define the character and energy of the track. A warm, rounded electric bass can give a smoother sound to your groove, while a synth bass might add punch or a more modern edge, or can simply be used for its weight alone, that sense of felt but not heard. I think it's important to consider how you want your song to sound first, before deciding what style of bass to use. For instance, in this track, the goal was to make a laid-back indie pop song, something along the lines of artists like Mac DeMarco. Because of the sound my client and I had in mind first, that helped dictate the sound of the bass I went for, which was this very flat, old-sounding bass tone. If, however, I swapped this out for something much brighter and more modern sounding, I think that would somewhat ruin the vibe of the song. Filtering and sound design is another big part of this. While bass naturally holds down a lot of the weight of a track, you can manipulate this to your advantage with things like EQ and filtering. For instance, similar to my first example of omitting a bass line entirely for contrast, you could instead filter out some low end during one section, then bring this back in during the more heavy, dense parts. A simple way of doing this would be to automate a filter on an EQ, possibly a low shelf or high pass filter, dip this out slightly during a verse or pre-chorus, then bring it back in for the chorus. Or you could play about with the bass perception. Say you want the bass to be upfront and present during the chorus, but only want the low end weight during another section. You could swap out or double up parts with bass synths, or even use entirely different bass guitars from one section to the next in order to get the exact sound you're after. For instance here, I still wanted some weight from a bass part, but I didn't want to use the same sound going from the verse into the pre-chorus and then the chorus. Instead, I swapped the bass out for this weird sounding, almost atonal bass synth, which still holds down some low end, but doesn't quite have the same feeling as the more typical distorted bass tone that then comes back in for the chorus. If you'd like to dive even deeper into why changing the playing style and note length of your bass lines matters, check out this video next.